on the application of Forge Care Homes Ltd and others versus Cardiff and Vale University Health Board and others.
The issue in this case is how much of the time spent by nurses in care homes should be funded by the NHS and how much by local authorities and self-funding residents. Local authorities have to provide or arrange residential care for people who are in need of care and attention which is not otherwise available to them. This includes board and all the other services provided in connection with the accommodation. However, local authorities are not allowed to fund, quote, nursing care by a registered nurse, end quote. This is funded by the NHS. But what does it mean? It is defined in Section 49 of the Health and Social Care Act 2001 as, quote, any services provided by a registered nurse and involving A, the provision of care, or B, the planning, supervision or delegation of care, other than any services which, having regard to their nature and the circumstances in which they are provided, do not need to be provided by a registered nurse, end quote. The local health boards in Wales all decided to pay a weekly flat rate, calculated by reference to the average amount of time nurses working in care homes spent on direct and indirect nursing care, but not on non-nursing personal care, standby, paid breaks, and receiving supervision. Several care home operators, and all but one of the local authorities in Wales, challenged this decision on the broad ground that it was not possible to draw such a sharp distinction between nursing and other kinds of care. They succeeded before the High Court, where the judge held that the NHS had to pay for all the services in fact provided by a registered nurse. The Court of Appeal, by a majority, found in favour of the health boards, except that by then the boards had conceded that they should pay for time where there had to be a registered nurse on standby duty. The Supreme Court unanimously holds that neither interpretation is correct. Too restrictive an interpretation is not appropriate, given that the 2001 Act was passed in response to the anomaly that everything done by a registered nurse in a hospital was paid for by the NHS, whereas under the previous law, that was not the case in care homes. However, if Parliament had intended that the NHS should pay for everything done by a registered nurse in a care home, it would have said so. On the other hand, if it had intended that the NHS should only pay for tasks which could only be done by a registered nurse, it would have said that. Rather, it has said that the NHS should pay for any services provided by a registered nurse and then limited it in two ways. First, those services have to involve the care of residents, that is, looking after them, but this could involve any form of care, nursing, personal or social. But secondly, care which, by reason of its nature and the circumstances in which it is provided, does not need to be provided by a registered nurse is excluded. Clearly, Parliament envisaged that there would be circumstances in which some personal or non-nursing care would have to be provided by a nurse. Some caring tasks, such as taking a resident to the lavatory, cannot sensibly be divided up into their nursing and non-nursing elements. The nursing task of providing an overall, holistic, person-centred plan for each resident who needs some nursing care may very well involve engaging in social and personal care tasks in order to understand the overall needs of the resident. Thus, nursing care by a registered nurse covers both direct and indirect nursing care, paid breaks, time receiving supervision, standby time, and time spent on providing, planning, or supervising or delegating the provision of other types of care which in all the circumstances ought to be provided by a registered nurse, because they're ancillary to or closely connected with or part and parcel of the nursing care which she has to provide. Thus, the appeal is allowed, the decision is quashed, and the health boards are directed to make it again in the light of the guidance given in this judgment, ideally after negotiation with all the parties with an interest in the outcome.